Hello, welcome back to the Build Your Coaching Business Around the 9 to 5 podcast. Today, I am talking about selling through my cycle. So, this is really targeted to my clients and my listeners who have a womb and experience the monthly cycle. It's a topic that's come up by request from one of my beautiful clients because I have been through quite a journey with my cycle and starting my coaching business. It's not something I've ever spoke about personally really before, though I've mentioned it in passing. And I wanted to share some of it today because it has really changed the way that I operate and the way that I have expectations of myself and the way that I move in this world as a woman and as a business owner. And I'm going to share today a couple of things. I'm going to share a little bit about my personal journey with it so that you can understand the context of why I'm even talking about this and some of the ways that it's impacted me and my business. I'm then going to go over the way that I think about my cycle and approach my cycle in my business in ways that will really help you to reflect on your cycle and if it's something that you want to implement in your business too. And then lastly, I'm also and then lastly, I'm going to share the ways that it impacts me, like as a woman in life outside of my business, just being in my CEO embodiment in life and business overall. And then finally, I'll give you the two books that I read when I was making the transition from being on the pill since I was 15 and coming off the pill in my early to mid 30s. So let's dive in, shall we? This is quite an interesting topic. Before I dive into this, I just want to say, obviously, I am not a medical professional. This is just for, I guess, entertainment purposes, and if you wish to use any of the advice that I give you in this podcast, then please make sure that you seek medical advice and medical expertise. I am just sharing my personal journey and my personal understanding of the cycle and how I like to think about it in the context of selling in my business and being a CEO and building a beautiful business that creates beautiful clients. So I can tell I'm kind of babbling. I can really tell that I'm out of my comfort zone speaking about this. So bear with me. But this really has been like an unexpected part of my journey into being a life coach. Like when I started life coaching, when I started building my business, I genuinely had no expectation that all of the ways that it would infiltrate my life, like from a spiritual level, from the way that I socialize, the way I drink alcohol or not, as the case may be. Maybe that could be a podcast for another day, and even with my cycle. So let me start from the beginning. I mentioned just now, I had been on the pill since I was 15, never questioned it. I am very lucky. I've always been like very comfortable being on the pill. And I was just told to go on it at 15. Like I didn't question it. And so I did. And then I entered the world of coaching and spirituality. And through me wanting to connect more to my spirituality and my true self, my soul self, I started questioning anything that I hadn't questioned before. And connecting to my womanhood and connecting to the energy in my womb and the energy in my body. And the fact that as a woman, I am blessed to have the possibility of being a vessel to human life. I just started developing this like sacred connection to my womb and I wanted to build a better relationship with it. And so on that journey to personal growth, and really exploring what it meant to be in my masculine and in my feminine, and really enjoying the dialogue around learning about masculine energy and feminine energy and connecting to me as a woman, I started recognizing that I didn't like having to take this pill every day without really having a good reason for it. And as I mentioned, I'm very blessed that my body is relatively healthy most of the time. And I had no reason that I knew of to stay on it. So I couldn't see a reason not to come off it. So I decided to explore and experiment with that. And as I decided to come off the pill, what I realized being a woman in corporate and being a woman in what I used to think of was a man's world, and let's face it, like capitalism and the patriarchy, and like even when you think back to like the Industrial Revolution, everything was designed to be open 24/7, to be consistent 24/7, for there to be industry and commerce 24/7. And that's a reflection of what it is to be a man, because men don't have cycles. They are consistent. They do, I mean, obviously they have some fluctuation day to day, but every single day they reset and they carry on. Whereas a woman's cycle is so much more variable and so much longer. And the world of corporate isn't designed with women in mind. And so as a woman in corporate who did everything right, you know my story by now, worked my way up the corporate ladder, promotion to promotion, job to job, salary to salary, commission check to commission check, salary check to salary check, and being in this like humdrum rhythm and grind of work hard, play hard, and in this cycle of it never freaking ending, of just like constant expectation of productivity, no consideration for fluctuation, no, at the time, and this was only a few years ago now, but especially at the time, like even then, even though the world was starting to change a little bit on this, like no consideration if I ever actually needed to take a few days off for my cycle. Like that was definitely not a thing until in the very like most recent years, and it's certainly still not mainstream. It worked for me then, because that's how I had chemically engineered my body to be. I literally was taking a drug every single day to stifle my natural cycle, so that I could like conform to the rules of society. It's so interesting. Like when I think back, who was my doctor? A male. Did he ever explain to me like why, or invite me to question why, or offer me another perspective? No, but why would he? And so as I'm like building my business and I'm recognizing that like this is 2021, I'm recognizing that, oh my gosh, like, this business could actually be a thing. Like I could do this full time. I want to do this full time. I want to build a life on my terms. I want to build a life that I love, that excites me, that brings me alive, that honors the full multidimensionality of who I am and what I'm about. Me having a natural cycle was a natural part of that. And don't get me wrong, like everything in hindsight, at the time, I probably couldn't have articulated any of that as clearly as I am now. But as I sit here reflecting on it deeply, I realized that of course it happened hand in hand. Of course it did. And I was craving a connection to my soul self, to my natural self. And so, of course, I wanted to come off this drug that was dulling down this beautiful cycle that is a natural part of what it is to be a woman. So I appreciate, you might be listening to this and you might have health conditions or things that mean that you have to be on the pill. And so please don't ever use any of what I say against you if this doesn't quite apply. That's why I'm really emphasizing how lucky I am to have a body that allows me just to have a cycle and it doesn't really change anything. But at the time, I also didn't know if that would be the case. I didn't know if I would experience like massive hormonal shifts. I didn't know if I would experience massive changes in my weight, in my habits, in my mood. And all of that comes hand in hand with being on the pill and knowing how to navigate your cycle. And as I came off the pill, some really interesting things did actually start to happen. I did start to feel a massive shift in my emotional awareness. I experienced emotions more fully, the good and the bad. And we'll go over some of those things in a second when I break down the phases of the cycle and how I like to think of them. And I did see shifts and I loved it. But as you know, if you've seen any of my marketing or been listening to me for a while, I always talk about CEO embodiment of your life and business. And your life is also referring to the relationship you have with your body. And so what I realized is as I was really going into and connecting deeper to my body as I'd come off the pill and I was starting to like see a pattern, because at first when I came off the pill, it took me a couple of weeks to come into some kind of regularity with my cycle. And then I started really noticing the emotional shifts. And it was fascinating. And I always say when it comes to CEO embodiment that it is about not being in toxic positivity and expecting everything to be happy sunshine and rainbows, but it's actually about being able to feel the fullness of life. That is true CEO embodiment, and navigate the fullness, meaning the good, the bad, and the ugly, or as I often say, the good, the beautiful, the bad, and the ugly, and navigate it all with loving compassion and neutrality. Like anything bad, this too shall pass. Anything good, this too shall pass. And there is nothing like having a cycle that has you on your best days and also catches you off guard on your worst days to really challenge you on your own embodiment. So let me dive in. This is the way that I think about my cycle. It's the 4 phases. And for some of you, this is going to be so obvious. And for some of you, this is going to be like game changing. So the 4 phases of your cycle are the winter, the spring, the summer, and the autumn. That's the winter, the spring, the summer, and the autumn, just like Mother Nature herself, right? And those phases are: the winter cycle is your menstrual phase. So the first day of your bleed is the first day of your winter cycle, and that's your menstruation when you're bleeding. That's, 1 to 5, 1 to 7 days. Then you transition into spring, which is like the next 5 to 7 days, which is your follicular phase. Then you transition into your summer, which is your ovulation phase for the next couple of days. It's not actually as long, but obviously everyone varies. And then at around day anything, depending on how long your cycle is, because obviously that can vary too, but anything from like day 18, 20, after your first bleed or after day 1 of your bleed, you then go into your autumn phase, which is your luteal phase. And then that luteal phase ends as soon as you start bleeding, properly bleeding again on day 1. And then the cycle continues. And I come originally from England, the Northern Hemisphere. So in the Northern Hemisphere, the annual year starts in January, bang in the middle of winter, right? So it's really easy to remember, especially if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. So for me, just as like a year starts and you go through the phases of winter, spring, summer, autumn, your menstrual cycle is like a condensed version of that over your 21 to whatever 32-day period of what your typical cycle is. And within that cycle, you're also going through this winter, spring, summer, and autumn. And so akinning it to the seasons, which was a game changer for me, is how I was able to navigate the emotional roller coaster that came with that, and to do so with grace and self-compassion and self-love, and knowing how to sell and harness the energy, and knowing when to scale back and when to honor my emotional state and honor what my body was trying to tell me. So in your winter phase, or at least in my winter phase, in the menstrual phase, I always feel very low energy. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm in a low mood, but I can be very low energy. Now, what's interesting is, for me, I'm a projector. Of those of you who know human design, apparently we're supposed to rest all the time. That being said, I'm not the type of person to nap. I'm not the type of person to work from my bed because I get a bad back and I don't enjoy it. I'm not the person to work from my sofa because I don't find that I'm productive or focused in that time. I work really well when I've got my beautiful desk set up, which is where I'm recording right now. And I work really well when I can create an environment where I'm like upright, I'm focused, I'm energized. That being said, especially in the first 1 to 3 days of my winter phase, my menstrual cycle, when I'm bleeding, I will give myself permission to go on the sofa or even work from bed. Now, I still like to get up and get dressed and like sort my shit out and like feel fresh and ready and energized. But that version of energized is a very different version of energized compared to when I'm like ovulating or something. So I actively honor the energy. Now, it doesn't mean I don't get shit done. It doesn't mean that I don't coach. My coaching clients, I meet once a week, every week, like religiously. Like that's just what we do. So even if I'm having a day one and I've got my busiest coaching day where I'm pretty much back to back with clients, even on that day, now I wouldn't do that on the sofa because I like to give my clients my full energy and focus. But where, compared to ovulation, in between session, I might be bursting with ideas, jumping on stories, writing blog ideas, capturing my creative ideas that are coming through. If it's like day one or day two or day three of my winter, I am just giving myself full permission to fully rest in between sessions, to nourish my body, to go slow, to calm down a little bit with social media, to leverage a bit more of like work that I've done previously, repurposing, using templates, so that I'm not trying to like rework the wheel. This has been so valuable to me, to honor my energy, to honor my cycle, and not ever make myself wrong for it. Just because I'm bleeding doesn't mean I'm like incapable of doing things in my business. I don't entertain that level of thinking. But what I do is I check in with myself a lot more. Whereas if I compare this to life in corporates, I didn't really have that chance. I didn't really have the choice. Like there wasn't really, I had to go to work. I had to be in an office. I had to be present. I couldn't be seen to be lying down in between sessions. I couldn't be seen not to be working in between meetings or in between presentations. I had to hit my KPIs no matter what. When I'm bleeding, it's just this permission slip is so much more evident. And because I've given myself that permission slip, because I've fully taken away all of that like toxic, grindy, expectation-y, oh, you've got to be seen, like that kind of bums in seats, the illusion of like being in the office, even if nobody's fucking working or actually putting an effort in, like that is the difference for me at home in my own space, honoring my energy, honoring my body. And because I do that, what you see in terms of output really doesn't look any different. What you see in terms of my productivity looks pretty much the same. Like you're not necessarily experiencing much of a difference because I'm doing so well honoring my energy in the background internally. Now, from a mindset perspective, this is something that I've noticed back, especially at the beginning of my business, when I would attach a lot more of like my belief and my ability to stay positive with the perception of success in my business. Meaning, if I wasn't seeing things like engagement, if I didn't have a consult booked that week, if I hadn't made money that month, I would turn that into a narrative very quickly. And what I found was if I was bleeding and in my winter phase, my ability to coach myself and master my mind and stay in my executive functioning and remind myself of my power and stay in the energy of surrender and trust, my capacity to do that was much lower. Now, fast forward a few years, practicing this a while, built a bit of mastery in my own embodiment. If I ever notice creepy little thoughts coming into my mindset and I'm like, oh God, like everything's feeling like a bit sluggish or a bit hard, it doesn't impact me. It doesn't impact my productivity. It doesn't impact my self-belief, and it doesn't impact my self-concept. And I recognize it, and I use that as even more of a permission slip to surrender and trust and hold the vision. So those of you who have been inside my Next Phase client or my Thrive one-to-one program, holding the vision, as you know, is everything, but especially during this phase of your menstrual cycle. And so honoring yourself from that mindset perspective, especially when you're in bear mode being kind of just want to hibernate, kind of want to scale back and relax, honoring that and not making yourself wrong for it is how you maintain massive momentum and continue to sell, even when you're in your winter, which is so fun. You're more likely to find me doing tarot or oracle cards, doing some reflection, especially if I happen to land on a full moon or a new moon. That's when I've got the crystals out, the sages out, I'm doing the rituals, I'm going ham for leather. I'm like full witch mode. It's beautiful. I love it. So I'm always like really connecting to like my sense of womanhood and my sense of spirituality. When I'm entering that follicular phase, so that spring phase, just like it is in springtime, right? Like the flowers are starting to bloom, the sun is shining a little bit more, the things are starting to blossom. Just in my business, I notice that when it comes to my creativity, my desire to implement, my desire to start to like get the wheels turning, to get things in motion. So maybe, whereas with winter, it was like back to my raw client generating activities. I ain't launching during my winter. I ain't trying to implement something brand new when I'm menstruating. In my spring, I'm like, oh, maybe this is a good time to launch. Maybe this is a good time to release that workshop. Maybe this is a good time to write that freebie or refresh my buy or whatever it is that I might think about doing. Now, as we know, you don't do busyness just for the sake of busyness. I'm very hot with my one-to-one clients on getting the business foundations tied up and tight and just working that implementation process. So especially if you're listening to this as one of my one-to-one clients, this is about really asking yourself, where can I start to elevate the momentum and potency? How can I harness this natural energy of creativity to actively build the momentum? And it doesn't necessarily mean do more, I mean be more. And that means showing up more powerfully, showing up with a bit more pizzazz, a bit more energy, a bit more drive, a bit more, come on, let's go for this, let's go for it. And I also think of spring as well as this very green, tender energy. Like, when the flowers start blooming, but then they could also die quite quickly. It's very like, it's not that the things are set in stone with your spring. Sometimes I have creative ideas and they don't go anywhere. I have like podcast ideas coming out of my eyeballs and they still haven't seen the light of day. That's okay because I have my business foundations in place. So I'm never really going astray. But that's also expected in that spring. And again, I don't judge myself for it. I don't judge myself for the things that aren't really getting any legs or any traction. I'm harnessing the momentum and energy while I have it, and I'm enjoying it while I can. And I'm starting those projects. And especially when I do notice myself having a bit of shiny object syndrome, wanting to do all the things and being at risk of overcommitting and then overexerting myself before I'm actually ready, because I'm actually not in my ovulation stage yet, then sometimes it's also practicing restraint. So those of you who have listened to my podcast for a little while now, you know how much I put emphasis on restrain in terms of your business foundations, your core foundations of your business, in terms of your offer, your price, your client, your marketing and sales strategy. So don't misconstrue what I'm saying in terms of starting projects and creative ideas as actually changing your marketing and sales strategy. I'm saying within the context of what you've decided is foundational within your business, then harnessing those creative ideas. So like I said, I have a podcast. I might find that I've got some like ideas for a series that I want to do within my podcast. Yeah. And maybe I'm executing on them, or maybe I'm not. But again, that embodiment piece is honoring that I'm very aware of what's actually going on in my cycle, and I'm purposely fostering constraint. So I'm not saying yes to everything. I'm not committing to everything. I am choosing intentionally and on purpose to really look at what I'm saying yes to and what I'm committing to, and staying in alignment with my client generating activities. So we want to watch out for that, like spring chicken, that kind of clucky green, a little bit naive approach that I sometimes can fall into when I'm in my spring. That I know that if I was in my luteal phase in my autumn, and especially in my winter, I wouldn't have the momentum to like commit to. So that's something that has definitely taken some practice. I feel with my winter, it's very cut and dry. With my spring, I'm sometimes not realizing it until I'm in it. And then I'm like, oh, we need to scale back. Oh, that thing I said yes to, that networking event, that co-working thing I said yes to, that I don't know, what else might you do? Like those coffee chats that you might commit to, that really actually wasn't a priority right now. Right? Maybe I'm just going to stick to what I need to in my business. So those are some of the like pros and cons when it comes to your spring phase. Notice how you see that happening in your own phase. Then when it comes to the summer, your ovulation, this is where you're at your peak energy. Well, at least for me, where I'm at my peak energy, I'm most sociable, I'm most outward, I'm most extroverted as best as I can be anyway. I am more likely to spontaneously want to go live, to batch create, whether that's my podcast, my blog, content creation. And the way I like to look at that is strike while the iron's hot. Nothing wrong with content creation. Nothing wrong with having a few in your back pocket to support you on your down days, to support you in your winter. Yeah, you're not meant to be a machine. You're not meant to just churn the same shit out every day. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you can get to a phase of consistency, then do. But when you know that the winter is coming, when you know the luteal phase is coming too, and when you know you might have a mercurial energy in your spring, if you can set yourself up for a bit of forward planning during your ovulation phase, amazing. And it might be that you're harnessing relationships, you're harnessing connectivity, you're harnessing spontaneous energy. I say jump on the bandwagon, have fun with it, leverage that momentum, get going. And you, again, similar to the spring phase, watch for like overexertion, watch for overcommitment, and watch for social overwhelm, especially if you're actually an introvert like me and you forget sometimes. And then you're like, oh my God, okay, I cannot sustain this. And you're having to scale it back real hard. And that's okay too. Like, again, the radical self-love and self-compassion throughout this whole process is everything. And I think that's been one of the things that has really helped me embody CEO embodiment so fully in my business, is actually really being in parallel with my cycle and seeing how this is happening, watching it play out, and not having that self-judgment, just being that objective observer and being like, oh, I see you now. In hindsight's a beautiful thing. Let's try and remember this for next time, and never making it a problem. So from your ovulation phase, that's fine and dandy. And then what I tend to notice is that my tolerance levels start to drop. my frustration or my lack of patience starts to increase slightly. And I see that when it comes to trying to do anything in the back end, like trying to build a landing page or update a checkout page or fix a template or check some kind of system, something with Kajabi, because I have Kajabi in terms of my back end of my CRM. When I see my patients wiltering with that, it's normally a sign I'm probably on around day 18 to 20, and the luteal phase, the autumn phase, is starting to come in. The leaves are dropping, the flowers are dead, my energy levels are gone. And what's actually happening is that my estrogen is dropping, but my progesterone is increasing. So even if my energy and my tolerance has dropped, what I also find is that my cognition and my problem solving and my attention to detail actually becomes very refined. We're walking the plank here. I ain't gonna lie. We're walking the plank. And even though I am very, 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 very blessed that by and large, my what we say PMS, I don't have terrible PMS by any stretch of the imagination. If I find myself getting frustrated or losing my tether or feeling like I want to throw my laptop out the window, maybe, then that is a sign I'm in my autumn. So what I find is short, sharp, highly focused, intentional bursts of energy work really, really well for me. So this is where I want to make sure that I am really connecting to what I enjoy in my life and that I'm not going into workhorse mode from this like hangover from the ovulation stage where I'm in like churn it out, batch creating, going live, talk to cameras on stories, going from that phase into this slightly like less extroverted but still pretty focused and still pretty committed. That's when I find preparing and planning, especially for me, especially in the last year, as I've been really focusing on my delivery inside my one-to-one so that I can explain business in a way that I've never explained it before. That's something that I really committed to with Thrive 2.0 is creating modules that make business just so simple, so easy to wrap your head around, so implementable. And what I find is in my autumn phase, when I need to sit down and really think, and I don't mean just have creative outlet, but actually like use my intellect, really think about my genius, what I bring to the table, like break down my process so that I can teach it and mentor my clients as powerfully and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. That's happening in my autumn phase. Now, if you're thinking, holy hell, like she's real tuned in, I promise you right now, this has been a trial and error process. So that's your luteal phase, the autumn phase, which is that PMS phase where you definitely want to make sure that you're honoring any commitments that you said you would. And again, there's a CEO embodiment at play here. Even if, it's not the right time, even if you can tell, oh God, okay, I made these decisions in my spring. I'm clearly not in the mood to network today, but sometimes we just have to be strong and we can cultivate and harness energy intentionally. And then we can kind of buffer ourselves and like love on ourselves anyway. That's a big thing that I'm very passionate about. So even if I make mistakes, I navigate those mistakes by never making myself wrong, by never berating myself, by never allowing it to become part of my self-concept that I failed, because I just don't entertain those thoughts anymore because they simply don't serve me. They never have, they never will. And so even in my luteal phase, when my tolerance is low, but my ability to focus is quite high, I am still honoring the cycle in every which way I possibly can. So now let me tell you about some of the wider ways that this has really like served me in terms of my coaching business. And I mentioned it a little bit before, but I really want to emphasize these next points. When it comes to selling with my cycle, I never ever let my cycle be an excuse. I don't let anything be an excuse, frankly. Excuses are just my brain's way of trying to get me off the hook from achieving my goals. And when I actually like scale back and I think, but why am I doing this? Who do I actually want to be? What do I actually want to achieve with this one precious life? Where am I going? What is my mission, my vision, my purpose, my why? When I actually think about those things, I think I come to this conclusion. It's even if I'm in my winter, how can I still be a powerful embodiment in my coaching business? How can I still show up powerfully with the capacity I have, not with the capacity I wish I had when I'm ovulating, but with the capacity I have in my winter, how can I still be powerful? How can I still honor my body? How can I still honor my intellect, my wisdom, my ability to still be a powerful coach no matter what? And I have so much evidence for this now. Think about all the times that you've ever done a coaching session when you've been less than your best. Think about the times where you've shown up and coached powerfully and facilitated beautiful transformations and breakthroughs for your clients, even when it's day one of your cycle. Or even when you're bang in the middle of ovulation and you're just scatterbrained and excitable and having to like catch your energy so that you can really meet your client where they're at and still give them that powerful transformation. That's the evidence. That's the case in point. So it's never letting my cycle be a reason not to. Then it is rest. I'm a huge advocate for rest and knowing when to rest and using rest as a powerful tool in my business. It's also keeping and committing to the habits that work for me and keep me at my best, keep me optimal, keep me focused. And that is going to the gym, eating well, looking after my body, nourishing my body. And that looks different at different phases of my cycle. You know, in my winter, I am very much all about eating food that nourishes me. It's the kind of food that I eat in the winter, literally, like soups and roast dinners and wholesome foods. And literally, my ovulation, I want things that are lighter, fresher, more salad based. It's such a cliche, but it really does reflect the seasons of the year. And then socially, I really watch myself both inside of my business and outside of my business. I know that when I am in my summer, I am more likely to want to do more at the weekend, to want to go out more in my day. If I'm in my winter, I'm more likely to be found at home, not doing much on my weekends. So again, I allow that fluctuation to reflect both in my business and in my home life. And when I honor that wave, that cycle that happens, what I find, as I said earlier, is my output stays consistent. My ability to achieve is consistent. My ability to be a powerful CEO in my business, for my clients, for my life, actually creates the appearance of consistency when on the outside looking in, which I think is really fascinating. Really, really fascinating way to think about it. So there you go. Hopefully that's giving you some food for thought, some reflection. And look, like I say, I'm not saying that you should go off the pill. I'm not saying that being on the pill is a bad thing. I'm just sharing my story and what it meant for me and how it's impacted my business and how I continue to sell even when I'm at any phase of my cycle. So let me share the books and the influences that I had. So first and foremost, I have to do a shout out to my beautiful coach, friend, and soul sister, Georgia Goodyew. I think you can find her as Georgia Goodyew on Instagram. And she does the most stunning work with mothers and their young daughters who are going through their first ever cycle and building the relationship with parents and their daughters. So especially if you have a daughter, then definitely go check her out because her work is just needed in this world. I have so much love and admiration for that woman and the work that she does. So the two books that I recommend if you're going through this transition or you're curious to learn more, even if you don't end up going on your natural cycle, if you already are and you just want to learn more and you want to see what my influences were, the two books are Period Power by Macy Hill. That book also deepened my knowledge of the natural cycle being akin to the seasons. Her book was so informative, really user-friendly. I actually listened to it on Audible and it was just brilliant. And really changed my perspective on things and gave me the confidence to make this shift. And then the second book that I happened to be reading at the same time that just went hand in hand so perfectly was called Pussy, a Reclamation. And that's by Regina Thomasauer. I hope I said her name correctly. I probably haven't, but Pussy, a Reclamation. You cannot miss it. And her work has been incredibly transformational for me. I've only read her book and I also listened to that on Audible. And it was just, wow, it was just brilliant. So I highly recommend those resources, and I'll make sure I put the links in the show notes for you as well. I am not affiliated in any way to any of those, to Georgia, to Macy's book or Regina's book. These are just the things that really supported me during that journey of connecting to my natural cycle. So I really, really want to hear from you if this was useful. I would love to know, is your experience similar to mine? Is it something that you're thinking of doing, or have you always been like not using the pill, always been natural? And when I say the word natural, I don't mean better in any way. It's just, it's worked really, really well for me. Again, I cannot emphasize enough. If you're on the pill for medical reasons, if you're on the pill for reasons that you love and it works for you, I love that for you too. Okay. But if you are, if this just was interesting and helpful in any way, especially in the context of being in your coaching business, being a powerful CEO in your coaching business and selling with a cycle, then I'd love, love, love to hear from you. Let me know as well if you want to hear about the human design stuff. So I'm very happy to share about my personal experiences with that. It's something I'm very intrigued by. And that's everything for now. So thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. I can't wait to connect with you next week, and we'll speak very soon.